India does not recognize or accept a category of political prisoners. Bengal, under the Left Front, following the entire oppression of the Nakshals under the Congress regime earlier in the 60s and 70s, had enacted some such vague law about treating political prisoners, but this has been diluted by the more recently elected TMC government. So we don't acknowledge, and I don't think there have been Supreme Court judgments also that have addressed specifically the category of political prisoner. So I'm saying generally even prisoners are not treated on par. Forget the fact that political prisoners should be treated as a dissenting citizen and therefore in a more special category. We do not have that concept at all. So, I mean, it is something that some of us talk about, movements are articulating, but we've not really articulated within the system this concept at all. I mean, there was a huge conversation about it during the national movement and the independence struggle, because right from the grassroots level, mass movement of the left who were incarcerated, apart from the more king like Bhagat Singh and others who were assassinated, you had lots and lots of people going to prison. But the more glamorous kind came with the Congress, Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, Maulana Azad, all went to jail. And because they were going to jail, and with them many other Congress persons were going to jail for cutting across castes and communities, the British sort of informally recognized a category of political prisoners. That these are people or leading movements who are fighting for the independence of India, and therefore they were allowed to. I mean, I was reading Tushar Gandhi's book on his grandmother, Kasturba. She was for a few days in the same jail as I was, though it was in the male premises. Now Sabarmati has a separate women's jail, but in the same Sabarmati Mahila jail, they were allowed to grow their own vegetables, they could have some dry fruits, they could have their own kind of tea being brewed, which was not over sweet, over boiled milk tea, whatever. These were conversations that were happening, at least for some section of prisoners under the British. But I don't think it was available even then for the large mass movements who were incarcerated. It was only for the more well-known leadership. But we don't really have in India the concept of political prisoners, operational. It needs to be an articulated demand. I think we need to begin with the whole conscientizing of the citizenry. Because I recall when I was late school and early college, years of the emergency being lifted, 77, 78, right up to the mid-80s, prison visits were a very important part of our, learning and education. If you look at all our internships, social work, legal aid cells, whether it was in college or university, you could volunteer to do prison visits. Plus there were organizations like PUCL and others who were organizing it. So many of us volunteered. So which means that prison visits was very much something that an active citizenry was into. So I think we need to begin there. Without prison visits taking place, without citizenry getting themselves to get around this opaque desire of the bureaucracy not to be transparent, but gently demanding that even within the non-amended prison manuals, according to the 81 judgment, there are visitorial rights that citizens have, and then pointing out the 2016 jail manual that talks about jail monitoring committees, district monitoring committees, and saying that, have you constituted one like that? Maybe it also needs visits, maybe it also needs RTIs. It needs us to interact with the political parties to make this part of their demand. Because without a kind of an upsurge among the people, it's unlikely that the system is going to listen to us. There's also the issue which I want to flag, which is the shocking political economy of jails. And this is something that shocked me. I consider myself a fairly well-read citizen, but I didn't know. I mean, I remember references to it in international writing on prisons, but I remember not really reading much about it in the Indian post-independence context. And what I'm trying to say is that if I go by what happened in Sabarmati, there were about 150 of us under trials and convicted women prisoners. And the entire political economy of that setup, maybe about 11 or 12 barracks, was run on the hard slave labor of 25, maximum 30 convicted women prisoners. I mean, I don't know how they chose them, I don't know whether it was a roster or what, but they would be working sometimes from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. doing all sorts of duties, from reading, from sanitation, from gardening, to sweeping, to cleaning the toilets, to cooking for 400 people every day, twice a day, to, of course, helping man the register at the jail visit thing. All sorts and kinds of work was only being done by these 25 to 30 women. And how much are they paid? 3,100 rupees. Now, this is like so exploitative because they then become dependent on this money because that's all they get. They are not, they've stopped getting their relatives visiting a long time ago because most of them have been convicted 7, 8, 10 years back. People are tired or can't afford to visit them. And they are earning far less than what the lowest in the prison bureaucracy earns, which is almost 19,000 upwards. So just look at what you're achieving through that. You're using a section of the prisoners to actually become the kind of watchdog, because some of these women are also the guardians in the barracks. So each barrack has one convicted prisoner who's supposed to guard over us, make sure we don't do wrong things, make sure we don't misbehave, the under trials. So you're creating a kind of mini Salva Judum kind of situation where they need the money, they're dependent on it, and therefore they're being used to police the under trials. So, all of this is pretty archaic, inhuman, and according to me, non-democratic. A lot of this needs to be questioned. You had these weekly visits by the superintendent coming in, which are really a farce because not too many complaints are really heard. And therefore, I think we really need to begin with conscientizing people, talking to the political opposition, and also demanding. I mean, for me, the greatest succor was, like I've mentioned before, is the letters I got in jail. And therefore, I think campaigns for political prisoners, at least, that you write letters to them, you communicate to them, which also kind of creates a certain atmosphere of confidence and security for them while they are incarcerated.